everyone. Oof, my hair. Welcome, my name is Saman Giraud. Turn this a bit. And I'll be reading for you from 1001 Nights. Since I reached out to several groups on Facebook, wonderful people all over the world who are promoting events, I would like to extend a very special and warm hello to people in Vancouver, in Gauteng, South Africa, in New York, in San Francisco, Oakland, Beijing, Prague. Did I forget anything? I don't think so. Welcome. If you don't know about our project and you're new to our little channel, Joanna Godwin-Seidel and I, from Vienna Theatre Project, we started reading the stories of 1001 Nights translated by Sir Richard Burton during our lockdown here in Vienna, Austria. Now, the lockdown has been lifted a while ago and we decided to keep reading for you. Yeah, for people anywhere in the world during these challenging times, and what better way than taking you to far foreign lands in times that have been long lost. Enjoy the reading, everyone, and we are at volume 3, just to let you know, and at the 128th night. Enjoy. Now when it was the 128th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Vizier Dandan pursued to King Zau al-Makan, and the youth Aziz continued to Taj al-Muluk. So I read what my cousin had written, and the charge to me which was, preserve this cloth with the gazelles, and let it not leave thee, for it was my companion when thou wast absent from me, and Allah upon thee, if thou chance to fall in with her who worked these gazelles, hold aloof from her, and do not let her approach thee, nor marry her. And if thou happen not on her, and find no way to her, look thou consort not with any of her sex. Know that she who wrought these gazelles worketh every year a gazelle cloth, and dispatcheth it to far countries, that her report and the beauty of her broidery, which none in the world can match, may be bruited abroad. As for thy beloved, the daughter of Dalila the wily, this cloth came to her hand, and she used to ensnare folk with it, showing it to them and saying, I have a sister who wrought this. But she lied in so saying, Allah rent her veil. This is my parting counsel, and I have not charged thee with this charge, but because I know that after my death the world will be straitened on thee, and haply by reason of this thou wilt leave thy native land and wander in foreign parts, and hearing of her who wrought these figures, thou mayest be minded to foregather with her. Then wilt thou remember me, when the memory shall not avail thee, nor wilt thou know my worth till after my death. And lastly, learn that she who wrought thee gazelles is the daughter of the king of the Camphor Islands, and a lady of the noblest. Now when I had read that scroll and understood what was written therein, I fell again to weeping, and my mother wept because I wept. And I ceased not to gaze upon it and to shed tears till nightfall. I abode in this condition a whole year, at the end of which the merchants with whom I am in this kafila prepared to set out from my native town. And my mother counselled me to equip myself and journey with them, so haply I might be consoled in my sorrow to dispel. Oh my God, my cat, Button! I'm so sorry. Excuse me. She's never done that before. Right. I abode in this condition a whole year, at the end of which the merchants with whom I am in this kafila prepared to set out from my native town. And my mother counselled me to equip myself and journey with them, so haply I might be consoled and my sorrow be dispelled, saying, "Take comfort, and put away from thee this morning, and travel for a year or 2 or 3, till the caravan return, when perhaps thy breast may be broadened, and thy heart hardened." And she ceased not to persuade me with endearing words, till I provided myself with merchandise, and set out with the caravan. But all the time of my wayfaring my tears have never dried, no, never. And at every halting place where we halt, I open this piece of linen, and look on these gazelles, and call to mind my cousin Azizah, and weep for her as thou hast seen. For indeed she loved me with dearest love, and died oppressed by my unlove. I did her naught but ill, and she did me naught but good. When these merchants return from their journey, I shall return with them, by which time I shall have been absent a whole year. Yet hath my sorrow waxed greater, and my grief and affliction were but increased by my visits to the islands of Camphor and the castle of Crystal. Now these islands are 7 in number, and are ruled by a king by name Shahriman, who hath a daughter called Dunya. And I was told that it was she who wrought these gazelles, and that this piece in my possession was of her embroidery. When I knew this, my yearning redoubled, and I burned with the slow fire of pining, and was drowned in the sea of sad thought. And I wept over myself for that I was become even as a woman, without manly tool like other men, and there was no help for it. From the day of my quitting the Camphor Islands, I have been tearful-eyed and heavy-hearted, and such hath been my case for a long while. And I know not whether it will be given me to return to my native land and die beside my mother or not, for I am sick from eating too much of the world. Thereupon the young merchant wept, and groaned, and complained, and gazed upon the gazelles, whilst the tears rolled down his cheeks in streams, and he repeated these 2 couplets. Joy needs shall come, a prattler 'gan to prattle. Needs sees thy blame, I was commoved to rattle. In time, quoth he. Quoth I, 'tis marvellous. Who shall ensure my life, O cold of tattle? And he repeated also these. Will Allah weet that since our severance day, I've wept till forced to ask of tears alone. Patience, the blamer cries, thou'lt have her yet. Quoth I, O blamer, where may patience wone? Then said he, this, O king, is my tale. Hast thou ever heard one stranger? So Taj al-Muluk marvelled with great marvel at the young merchant's story, and fire darted into his entrails on hearing the name of the Lady Dunya and her loveliness. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 129th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Vizier Dandan continued to Zawal Makan. Now when Taj al-Muluk heard the story of the young merchant, he marvelled with great marvel, and fire darted into his entrails on hearing the name of the Lady Dunya, who, as he knew, had embroidered the gazelles, and his love and longing hourly grew. So he said to the youth, by Allah, that hath befallen thee, whose like never befell any save thyself, but thou hast a life-term appointed, which thou must fulfil. And now I would fain ask of thee a question. Quoth Aziz, and what is it? Quoth he, wilt thou tell me how thou sawest the young lady who rode these gazelles? Then he, O my lord, I got me access to her by a sleight, and it was this. When I entered her city with the caravan, I went forth and wandered about the garths, till I came to a flower garden abounding in trees, whose keeper was a venerable old man, a sheikh stricken in years. Button. I addressed him, saying, O ancient sir, whose may be this garden? And he replied, it belongs to the king's daughter, the Lady Dunya. We are now beneath her palace, and when she is minded to amuse herself, she openeth the private wicket, and walketh in the garden, and smelleth the fragrance of the flowers. So I said to him, favour me by allowing me to sit in this garden till she come. Haply I may enjoy a sight of her as she passeth. The sheikh answered, there can be no harm in that. Thereupon I gave him a dirham or so, and said to him, buy us something to eat. He took the money gladly, and opened the door, and entering himself admitted me into the garden, where we strolled and ceased not strolling till we reached a pleasant spot, in which he bade me sit down and await his going and his returning. Then he brought me somewhat of fruit, and leaving me disappeared for an hour. But after a while he returned to me, bringing a roasted lamb, of which we ate till we had eaten enough, my heart yearning the while for a sight of the lady. Presently, as we sat, the postern opened, and the keeper said to me, rise and hide thee. I did so, and behold, a black eunuch put his head out through the garden wicket and asked, O sheikh, is there anyone with thee? No, answered he. And the eunuch said, shut the garden gate. So the keeper shut the gate, and lo, the Lady Dunya came in by the private door. When I saw her, methought the moon had risen above the horizon and was shining. So I looked at her a full hour, and longed for her as one athirst longeth for water. After a while she withdrew and shut the door, whereupon I left the garden and sought my lodging, knowing that I could not get at her, and that I was no man for her, more especially as I was become like a woman, having no manly tool. Moreover, she was a king's daughter, and I but a merchant man. So how could I have access to her, to the like of her, or to any other woman? Accordingly, when these my companions made ready for the road, I also made preparation and set out with them. And we journeyed towards this city till we arrived at the place where we met with thee. Thou askest me, and I have answered, and these are my adventures, and peace be with thee. Now when Taj al-Muluk heard that account, fires raged in his bosom and his heart, and thought were occupied with love for the Lady Dunya, and passion and longing were sore upon him. Then he arose and mounted horse, and taking Aziz with him, returned to his father's capital, where he settled him in a separate house and supplied him with all he needed in the way of meat and drink and dress. Then he left him and returned to his palace with the tears trickling down his cheeks, for hearing oftentimes standeth instead of seeing and knowing. And he ceased not to be in this state till his father came in to him, and finding him wan-faced, lean of limb and tearful-eyed, knew that something had occurred to chagrin him, and said, O my son, acquaint me with thy case, and tell me what hath befallen thee, that thy colour is changed, and thy body is wasted. So he told him all that had passed, and what tale he had heard of Aziz, and the account of the Princess Dunya, and how he had fallen in love of her on hearsay without having set eyes on her. Quoth his sire, O my son, she is the daughter of a king whose land is far from ours. So put away this thought and go into thy mother's palace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 130th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Vizier Dandan continued to Zau al-Makan. And the father of Taj al-Muluk spake to him on this wise, O my son, her father is a king whose land is far from ours. So put away this thought, and go into thy mother's palace, where are 500 maidens like moons, and whichsoever of them pleaseth thee, take her, or else we will seek for thee in marriage some one of the king's daughters fairer than the Lady Dunya. Answered Taj al-Muluk, O my father, I desire none other, for she it is who wrought the gazelles which I saw, and there is no help but that I have her, else I will flee into the world, and the waste, and I will slay myself for her sake. Then said his father, Have patience with me, till I send to her sire and demand her in marriage, and win thee thy wish as I did for myself with thy mother. Haply Allah will bring thee to thy desire, and if her parent will not consent, I will make his kingdom quake under him, with an army whose rear shall be with me, whilst its van shall be upon them. Then he sent for the youth Aziz and asked him, O my son, tell me, dost thou know the way to the Camphor Islands? He answered, Yes. And the king said, I desire of thee that thou fare with my vizier thither. Replied Aziz, I hear and I obey, O king of the age. Whereupon the king summoned his minister and said to him, Devise me some device, whereby my son's affair may be rightly managed, and fare thou forth to the Camphor Islands, and demand of the king his daughter in marriage for my son, Taj al-Muluk. The vizier replied, hearkening and obedience. Then Taj al-Muluk returned to his dwelling place, and his love and longing redoubled, and the delay seemed endless to him. And when the night darkened around him, he wept and sighed and complained and repeated this poetry. Dark falls the night, my tears unaided rail, and fiercest flames of love my heart assail. Ask thou the nights of me, and they shall tell, and I find aught to do but weep and wail. Night long awake I watch the stars what while pour down my cheeks the tears like dropping hail. And lone and lorn I'm grown with none to aid, for kith and kin the love-lust lover fade. And when he had ended his reciting, he swooned away and did not recover his senses till the morning, at which time there came to him one of his father's eunuchs, and, standing at his head, summoned him to the king's presence. So he went with him, and his father, seeing that his pallor had increased, exhorted him to patience and promised him union with her whom he loved. Then he equipped Aziz and the vizier and supplied them with presents, and they set out and fared on, day and night, till they drew near the Isles of Camphor, where they halted on the banks of a stream, and the minister dispatched a messenger to acquaint the king of his arrival. The messenger hurried forwards, and had not been gone more than an hour before they saw the king's chamberlains and emirs advancing towards them, to meet them at a parasang's distance from the city, and escort them into the royal presence. They laid the gifts before the king and became his guests for 3 days. And on the 4th day, the vizier rose, and going in to the king, stood between his hands and acquainted him with the object which induced his visit. Whereat he was perplexed for an answer, inasmuch as his daughter misliked man and disliked marriage. So he bowed his head groundwards a while, then raised it, and calling one of his eunuchs, said to him, "Go to thy mistress, the Lady Dunya, and repeat to her what thou hast heard, and the purport of this vizier's coming." So the eunuch went forth, and returning after a time said to the king, "O king of the age, when I went in to the Lady Dunya and told her what I had heard, she was wroth with exceeding wrath, and rose at me with a staff designing to break my head. So I fled from her, and she said to me, if my father force me to wed him, whomsoever I wed, I will slay." Then said her sire to the vizier and Aziz, "Ye have heard, and now ye know all. So let your king wot of it, and give him my salutations, and say that my daughter misliketh man and disliketh marriage." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. I hope you enjoyed this one. I am so sorry that my cat just ran across the screen. Anyways, it was a lovely one. Please tune in tomorrow. Joanna will be reading the 131st night. We still have about 900 to go, I guess. No, 800 something. Wherever you are, I hope you may be safe. I'm sorry, I'm really hot. You may be safe and sound. Good morning, good day, good evening, and good night. And as usual, remember to go inwards instead of outwards. Sending you much love from Vienna, Austria, and I'll see you next week.